The conference room on the 42nd floor had windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, and Rebecca Harris stood at the head of the mahogany table wondering if anyone could see her hands trembling as she queued up her presentation. She had pitched dozens of times before, but never to a firm like Castellan Capital, and never with so much riding on the outcome. Her sustainable packaging company needed this investment to survive the next quarter, and she had exactly 30 minutes to convince 7 stone-faced partners that biodegradable alternatives to plastic could generate serious returns. Ryan Castellan walked into the room late, which was unusual for him. He prided himself on punctuality, on setting the tone for meetings, on being the one who controlled the tempo. But his previous call had run over, and now he slipped through the door just as a woman with auburn hair pulled into a practical ponytail was introducing herself. He took his seat at the far end of the table, nodding to his partners, and looked up to give her his attention. That was when everything shifted. She was speaking about market projections, about the growing consumer demand for environmentally responsible products. But Ryan found himself unable to process the words. He was staring at the way her green eyes lit up when she talked about her company, the way her whole face transformed from nervous to passionate in the span of a sentence. She gestured with her hands, and he noticed the ink stain on her thumb, the slightly frayed cuff of her blazer that she had clearly worn to every important meeting because it was her lucky one. There was something raw and real about her that made everyone else he met in this building feel like polished mannequins. Rebecca clicked to the next slide, discussing supply chain logistics, and she caught the CEO staring at her. Not the analytical stare of someone evaluating numbers, but something else entirely, something that made heat rise to her cheeks. She stumbled over her next sentence, then recovered, forcing herself to look at the other partners instead. She could not afford to lose focus. Not now. Ryan realized he had been caught and shifted his gaze to his notepad, scribbling something that probably looked important but was actually just random lines. What was wrong with him? He sat through presentations every single day. Beautiful women pitched to him regularly. This should not feel different, but it did. When Rebecca finished, there was a moment of silence before questions began. Ryan's senior partner, David, led the interrogation, probing into profit margins and scalability. She answered each question with confidence, occasionally referencing materials in the binder she had prepared for each of them. Ryan flipped through his copy, impressed by the thoroughness, by the fact that she had anticipated nearly every concern. What about competition? Ryan heard himself ask, his voice sounding strange in his own ears. There are 3 other major players in this space now. What makes your company worth backing over them? Rebecca met his eyes directly this time, and he felt the impact of that gaze like a physical thing. Because they are all founded by people who saw a business opportunity, she said. I founded Green Wrap because I spent 6 months volunteering at a marine conservation project after college and watched them pull 40 pounds of plastic packaging out of a sea turtle. The other companies will pivot to whatever is profitable. I will die on this hill. That kind of commitment means I will outwork, out-innovate, and outlast every single one of them. The room was quiet. Then David cleared his throat. We will discuss internally and get back to you within a week, he said, which was the standard dismissal. Rebecca nodded, gathering her materials with hands that were steady now that the hard part was over. She shook hands with each partner, thanking them for their time. When she reached Ryan, his hand was warm and firm, and he held on just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Really impressive work, he said, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with business. Thank you, she replied, and then she was gone, heels clicking on the marble floor outside. Ryan sat back down as the door closed behind her. David was already pulling up his evaluation matrix on his laptop. "Strong fundamentals," David said. "Market timing is good. She is asking for $3 million, which is reasonable for where they are. I am inclined to pass, though. Too much competition, and her emotional attachment could be a liability if they need to make hard pivots." "I disagree," Ryan said immediately. Several partners looked at him in surprise. He rarely contradicted David's assessments in the initial discussion. That emotional attachment is exactly why this is a good investment. Passionate founders work harder, and she clearly has the intelligence to back it up. Did you see the competitive analysis section? She knows exactly what everyone else is doing and where the gaps are. David raised an eyebrow. "You want to move forward," Ryan nodded. "I want to do due diligence, full workup. I will oversee it personally." That raised more eyebrows. Ryan Castellan did not oversee due diligence personally. He had people for that, but no one questioned him directly. He had built this firm from nothing 12 years ago, turning his first successful exit into a venture capital empire. At 34, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the city, and he had earned his reputation by being ruthless, analytical, and almost never wrong, which was why the way he felt right now terrified him. He spent the rest of the day in meetings, but his mind kept drifting back to green eyes and ink-stained thumbs. It was absurd. He was a grown man, not a teenager with a crush. But when his assistant asked if he wanted his usual dinner reservation, he said no, and instead found himself pulling up Green Wrap's website, reading every page, watching an interview Rebecca had done with a sustainability podcast 6 months ago. In the video, she was more relaxed, wearing jeans and sitting in what looked like her office. She laughed at something the host said, and the sound did something strange to Ryan's chest. She talked about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about her father who had been a fisherman and taught her to respect the ocean, about how she had studied business and environmental science, determined to find a way to merge profit with purpose. Ryan closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights spread out below his office. He had built his entire adult life around control, around calculated risks and emotional distance. He dated occasionally, always women who understood that his company came first, that he was not looking for anything serious. It had been working fine, until now. The due diligence took 3 weeks, and Ryan inserted himself into every step of it. He reviewed financial statements personally, joined calls with Rebecca's suppliers, even visited the Green Wrap facility across town. Rebecca seemed surprised to see him there, giving him and the due diligence team a tour of the production floor. She was wearing jeans and a Green Wrap t-shirt, safety goggles pushed up on her head, and she was somehow even more beautiful than she had been in the conference room. She introduced them to her small team, 12 people who clearly adored her, and Ryan watched the way she knew all their names, asked about their families, listened when they suggested improvements to processes. "This is Maria," Rebecca said, stopping by a workstation where a woman in her 50s was testing material samples. "She has been with me since day one. Took a huge pay cut to leave her corporate job because she believed in what we are building." Maria smiled. "Best decision I ever made. I actually get to go home and tell my grandkids I am making the world better." Ryan found himself staying after his team left, asking Rebecca more questions, watching her face animate as she talked about new materials they were developing, about partnerships with major retailers that were in negotiation. They ended up in her office, a cramped space with a second-hand desk and walls covered in photos of ocean wildlife. "Sorry about the mess," she said, moving a stack of binders off the only visitor chair. "We put all our money into production and R&D. Pretty offices can wait." "I like it," Ryan said, and he meant it. It felt real in a way his sleek headquarters never did. Rebecca sat on the edge of her desk, and they talked for another hour. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being about business and became about everything else. She asked him why he started Castellan Capital, and instead of giving his usual polished answer about market opportunities, he told her the truth. "I grew up poor," he said. "Not struggling, but definitely paycheck to paycheck. My dad worked construction, my mom was a nurse. They were happy, but I watched them stress about money my entire childhood. I was good at math, got a scholarship to business school, and decided I was going to make enough that I would never have to worry. First company I built was a logistics software that I sold for $40 million when I was 26. I could have retired, but I realized I was good at spotting potential in other companies, in other founders, so I started the fund." "You still talk to your parents?" Rebecca asked. "Every Sunday. They still live in the same house I grew up in, even though I have offered a dozen times to buy them something bigger. My mom says she likes knowing all her neighbors." He smiled. "They think what I do is boring compared to my sister, who is a trauma surgeon." Rebecca laughed. "I like them already." "What about your family?" Ryan asked. Her expression shifted, something sad crossing her face. "Dad died 4 years ago, cancer. Mom is still in Oregon, remarried to a good guy. I have a younger brother who is a park ranger in Montana. We are close, even though we do not see each other enough." "I am sorry about your dad," Ryan said. "Thanks. He is actually why I push so hard with this company. He spent 40 years fishing those waters, and towards the end he said he could see the difference, see the damage. Made me promise I would do something about it." She looked away. "Sorry, that is probably too much personal information for a business meeting." "This stopped being a business meeting about an hour ago," Ryan said quietly. Rebecca met his eyes, and the air between them felt charged. Ryan stood, and for a moment he thought about closing the distance between them, about finding out if her lips were as soft as they looked. But he stopped himself. He was still evaluating her company. It would be inappropriate, potentially problematic. He needed to maintain professional boundaries. "I should go," he said, "but thank you for the tour. It was enlightening." She walked him out, and in the parking lot they stood by his car, neither quite ready to end the evening. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said, "and you can tell me if I am out of line. Go ahead." "Why are you really here?" "I mean, actually here, not sending your analysts. I looked up your company. You do not usually involve yourself at this level." Ryan considered lying, giving some professional reason. But something about the way she looked at him, direct and honest, made him want to match that honesty. "Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since you walked into that conference room," he said. Rebecca's eyes widened. "Oh. But I want to be clear," Ryan continued. "That will not affect my investment decision. If the numbers work, we will fund you because it is a good investment. If they do not work, we will not fund you because it is a bad investment. My personal feelings do not enter into that equation." "And what are your personal feelings?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I would very much like to take you to dinner, after we finalize the business arrangement, whichever way it goes." She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "I would like that too." The next 2 weeks were torture. Ryan's team completed their analysis, and the news was mixed. Green Wrap had strong fundamentals and huge market potential, but they were burning through cash faster than projected, and 2 of their major retail partnerships were less certain than Rebecca had indicated. It was exactly the kind of risky investment that could go either way. Ryan called a partner meeting to discuss. David presented the findings, recommending they pass. Too much uncertainty, David concluded. Better opportunities available with less risk. Ryan looked around the table at his partners. These were people he trusted, people who had helped build Castellan Capital into what it was. They were right to be cautious. And yet, "I think we should do it," Ryan said. $3 million for 20% equity, but with conditions. We put our CFO in as an advisor to help with cash flow management. We help facilitate the retail partnerships through our network. We stay closely involved through the growth phase. That is a lot of hand-holding for a Series A, another partner pointed out. It is a lot of potential if we do it right, Ryan countered. Look at the consumer trend data. Look at the regulatory environment. This sector is about to explode, and Rebecca Harris is positioned to be the leader. Yes, she needs help with the operational side. That is exactly what we are supposed to provide. There was discussion, debate, but ultimately Ryan's voice carried the most weight. The vote was 5-2 in favor of moving forward. Ryan called Rebecca himself to deliver the news. "Hello." She sounded breathless, like she had run to catch the phone. "Rebecca, it is Ryan Castellan." "Oh God." He could hear her sit down. "Okay, hit me. We are in. $3 million for 20% with the conditions I am emailing you right now. I want our CFO, Margaret Chen, to work with you on financial management, and I want monthly check-ins at least for the first year." There was silence on the other end, then a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. "Are you serious? Ryan, are you serious right now?" "Completely serious. You built something real, Rebecca. We want to help you scale it." "Oh my God, oh my God. I need to call my team. I need to call my mom. I need to breathe." She laughed, definitely laughing now. Thank you so much. You will not regret this." "I know I will not," Ryan said. "Listen, the lawyers will be in touch about paperwork. Probably take 2 weeks to finalize everything. But once it is done, once everything is official and signed, I would like to take you to that dinner, if you are still interested." "Yes," Rebecca said immediately. "Absolutely yes." Those 2 weeks were even worse than the previous ones. Ryan found excuses to email Rebecca about contract details, about introducing her to Margaret, about setting up the first board meeting. Every interaction was professional, appropriate, and left him wanting more. Finally, on a Friday evening, the contracts were signed. Rebecca had 20 employees now instead of 12, had moved into a bigger facility, had cash in the bank to fund the next phase of growth. Ryan sat in his office after the signing, watching the clock, waiting for an appropriate amount of time to pass before texting her. His phone buzzed first. "So about that dinner," Rebecca's text said. Ryan smiled at his phone like an idiot. "Tomorrow night, I will pick you up at 7. I will send you my address. Fair warning, I live in a tiny apartment in a questionable neighborhood. Do not judge me." Never. Ryan spent more time getting ready for that date than he had for any business meeting in his life. He changed shirts 3 times, debated between 2 different watches, and gave up on his hair after the 4th attempt to make it look casually perfect instead of carefully styled. Finally, he grabbed his keys and headed out, driving to an address in a neighborhood that was not questionable so much as clearly just working class. Rebecca lived on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. He texted when he arrived, and she came down a few minutes later wearing a dark blue dress that made her eyes even more striking. Her hair was down for the first time since he had met her, falling in waves past her shoulders. "Wow," Ryan said, then felt like an idiot for not having something more eloquent prepared. "You clean up pretty nice yourself," Rebecca said, and he realized she was nervous too, which somehow made him feel better. He took her to a restaurant he had carefully selected, upscale enough to be special but not so fancy that it would feel uncomfortable. They were seated at a quiet corner table, and for the first few minutes, they both seemed uncertain how to navigate this new dynamic. Everything before had been business or pretending to be business. This was something else entirely. "This is weird, right?" Rebecca said finally. "Like good weird, but definitely weird." Ryan laughed, tension breaking. "So weird, I keep wanting to ask about your quarterly projections." "Please do not. I want one evening where I do not think about burn rates and supply chains." She took a sip of wine. "Tell me something about you that is not related to work, hobbies, interests, secret talents." "I rock climb," Ryan said. "Indoor mostly, but I try to get outdoors a few times a year. There is something about it that completely clears my head. You cannot think about anything else when you are 40 feet up a wall." "That sounds terrifying." "It is at first, but then it becomes meditative." He leaned forward. "What about you?" "I paint," Rebecca admitted. "Badly, like truly terrible, but I love it. I have a little easel set up by my window, and on Sundays I paint whatever I feel like. Usually ocean scenes. Last week I painted my brother's dog from a photo. It looked like a brown blob with eyes." Ryan found himself laughing, really laughing, in a way he rarely did. They ordered food and kept talking, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. She told him about disastrous college dating experiences, about the time she accidentally dyed her hair green trying to go blonde, about her secret addiction to reality cooking shows. He told her about the year he spent backpacking through Asia after his first company sale, about his terrible singing voice, about how he still got nervous before big presentations. Somewhere during the main course, Ryan realized this was the most relaxed he had felt in years. Maybe ever. Rebecca had a way of looking at him like he was just a person, not a CEO or a billionaire or a means to an end, just Ryan. "Can I ask you something serious?" Rebecca said as they shared a dessert neither of them needed. "Of course." "Does this complicate things? With the investment, I mean." "I do not want there to be any weirdness with your partners or my team, or anyone thinking I got funding because of personal reasons." Ryan appreciated the question, the fact that she was thinking about the professional implications. "It might be complicated," he admitted. "But I meant what I said before. We invested because Green Wrap is a solid company with huge potential. This, whatever this is between us, is separate, and we can be as public or private about it as you are comfortable with." "I just want to be transparent," Rebecca said. "I have worked too hard to have anyone discount my success as anything other than earned." "Then we will be transparent. We will tell our respective teams that we are seeing each other, and we will maintain appropriate boundaries in professional settings." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "But right now, in this moment, I would really like to kiss you." Rebecca's breath caught. "I would really like that too." They skipped coffee and Ryan drove her home. He walked her up the 3 flights of stairs, and at her door, she turned to face him. The hallway was dimly lit, and he could hear a television playing in a nearby apartment, someone laughing, normal life happening around them. Ryan cupped her face in his hands, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. But she leaned into him, and when their lips met, it was better than anything he had imagined. She tasted like the chocolate cake they had shared, and her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and Ryan felt something in his chest crack open, something he had kept carefully locked away for years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rebecca rested her forehead against his. "That was worth the wait," she whispered. "Definitely worth the wait," Ryan agreed. They started dating officially after that, navigating the strange intersection of personal and professional. Ryan introduced Rebecca to Margaret Chen, and the two women hit it off immediately, spending hours going over Green Wrap's financials and developing new cash flow strategies. Rebecca met Ryan's parents on a Sunday dinner that he was terrified about, but his mother adored her instantly, and his father spent an hour talking to her about fishing. Rebecca's team figured out something was happening when Ryan showed up to a monthly check-in with coffee for everyone and knew exactly how Rebecca took hers. Maria cornered her after the meeting. "So the hot billionaire, huh?" Maria said with a knowing smile. Rebecca felt her face heat. "Is it that obvious? Honey, he looks at you like you hung the moon, and you have been smiling at your phone for 3 weeks straight. I am happy for you. Just be careful, okay? Mixing business and pleasure can get messy." "I know," Rebecca said. "We are being careful." But the truth was, it did not feel careful. It felt like falling, like jumping off a cliff and trusting there would be something to catch her. Ryan was nothing like she expected. Yes, he was driven and successful, but he was also kind and funny and surprisingly vulnerable when they were alone. He told her about the pressure of managing other people's money, about the weight of being responsible for the livelihoods of everyone at his firm. She told him about the terror of almost losing Green Wrap, about nights when she could not sleep, because she was calculating how many more months they could survive. 3 months into their relationship, Rebecca's brother Jake visited from Montana. Ryan offered to give them space, but Rebecca insisted he join them for dinner. Jake was tall and bearded, with the kind of easygoing nature that came from spending most of his time in wilderness. He and Ryan were almost comically different, but they found common ground talking about outdoor adventures. "So you are the one who gave my sister $3 million, Jake said over beers. "My firm invested $3 million in her company," Ryan corrected. "Important distinction." Jake studied him for a long moment. "She tell you about how she almost gave up on Green Wrap last year, about how she was down to $5,000 in the bank and had maxed out every credit card, Jake," Rebecca warned. "No, he should know," Jake continued. "Should know that you are not just dating some casual entrepreneur. You are with someone who bet everything, her entire life, on this company. That kind of all-in commitment, it is scary. But it is also who she is. You cannot separate Rebecca from Green Wrap." Ryan looked at Rebecca, seeing the discomfort on her face, but also the truth in her brother's words. "I know that," he said quietly. "It is one of the things I love about her." The words hung in the air. It was the first time either of them had used that word. Rebecca's eyes went wide, and Jake suddenly became very interested in his beer. Later, after Jake had gone back to his hotel, Rebecca and Ryan sat on her couch in her tiny apartment. "Did you mean it?" Rebecca asked. "What you said at dinner?" Ryan turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I have been in love with you since you talked about pulling plastic out of a sea turtle. I just did not realize it until recently." "That is very specific," Rebecca said, but her voice was shaky. "I am a very specific person." He took her hand. "I know it is fast, I know it is complicated, but I am in love with you, Rebecca. I wake up thinking about you, and I fall asleep thinking about you, and every moment in between is just waiting until I can see you again." She launched herself at him, kissing him hard, and when she pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. "I love you too," she said. "I was trying not to because it was terrifying and unprofessional and way too soon. But I do, I love you." They spent that night together for the first time, and it was everything first times should be, awkward and perfect and full of laughter and tenderness. Ryan woke up with Rebecca curled against him, her hair spread across his chest, and thought that this was what people meant when they talked about home. But loving someone while also having a professional relationship with them turned out to be complicated in ways neither had anticipated. 6 months after the investment, Green Wrap hit a major snag. One of their largest retail partners pulled out of a contract at the last minute, leaving them with $250,000 in inventory and no buyer. Rebecca was devastated, and Ryan found himself in an impossible position. "We need to pivot," Margaret said at an emergency board meeting. "Find new buyers, maybe at a discount. We cannot sit on this inventory." "We will lose money," Rebecca said, her voice tight. "We will barely break even, and we were counting on that revenue for next quarter's production run." Ryan wanted to reach for her hand to comfort her, but they were in a professional setting with 3 other board members present. "What if we extended the funding round? Brought in another strategic partner?" "That dilutes Rebecca's stake even further," David pointed out. He was attending as an observer, and Ryan could tell he was skeptical about the whole situation. "At some point, she loses control of her own company." "Then what do you suggest?" Rebecca snapped, then immediately looked apologetic. Sorry, I am just frustrated." The meeting ended without clear resolution, and Ryan followed Rebecca back to her office. She was pacing, running her hands through her hair, and he recognized the signs of an impending breakdown. "Hey," he said softly, closing the door. "Talk to me." "I cannot do this," she said. "I cannot be in a board meeting with you and not know if you are saying things because they are the right business decision or because you are trying to protect me. I cannot look at you and think about how much I love you while simultaneously watching my company fall apart." "Green Wrap is not falling apart. This is a setback, and we will figure it out." "How?" She turned to face him, and he saw real fear in her eyes. "How do we figure it out without you either saving me, which makes me dependent and undermines everything I have built, or stepping back and letting me fail, which would kill me?" Ryan did not have a good answer. Because she was right. The line they were walking was razor thin. "Let me call some people," he said finally. "I know buyers in the retail space. Let me make introductions, create opportunities, but you close the deals. You negotiate the terms. I am just opening doors." "That is still using your influence." "Yes, it is. That is what having a venture capital firm as an investor means. We bring networks and connections. It is not charity. It is part of the deal." Rebecca sat down heavily in her chair. "I am scared, Ryan. I am scared of losing my company, and I am scared of losing you, and I am scared that I cannot have both." He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "You are not going to lose either, I promise you. We will figure this out." And they did, but it took work. Ryan made introductions to 3 potential buyers, and Rebecca spent 2 weeks in intensive negotiations. She ended up selling the inventory at a slight markup, enough to cover costs and provide breathing room. But more than that, 2 of the new buyers became ongoing partners, providing more stable revenue than the original deal would have when the contracts were signed. Rebecca called Ryan from her office. "We did it," she said, and he could hear the exhaustion and relief in her voice. "You did it," he corrected. "I just made some phone calls. You are the one who convinced them to buy, who negotiated terms that actually work." "Can you come over tonight?" she asked. "I just want to be with you. No work talk, no company talk, just us." "I will be there in an hour." He showed up with takeout from her favorite Thai place and a bottle of wine. They ate sitting on her floor because her couch was covered with fabric samples she was evaluating. She told him about the negotiations, about how terrified she had been, and how empowering it felt to close the deals herself. He told her about a new startup that had pitched his firm that day, about how he kept comparing every founder to her and finding them lacking. "I have been thinking," Rebecca said, setting down her wine glass, "about us and about work and how we manage the overlap." Ryan's chest tightened. Okay. I do not want to keep hiding at the office. I do not want to pretend we are just professional associates when anyone with eyes can see how we look at each other. But I also need to maintain credibility with my team and with the industry. What are you proposing? That we go public with the relationship, completely transparent. Yes, you are my investor, and yes, we are together. And we let our work speak for itself. If Green Wrap succeeds, it succeeds because we built a good company with a solid team. If it fails for the same reason most startups fail, not because we were unprofessional. Ryan considered this. People will talk. They will say you slept your way to funding. Let them. Rebecca's jaw set in that determined way he loved. Anyone who actually looks at our numbers and our growth will see the truth. I am tired of being afraid of perception. I would rather be honest and deal with whatever comes. Then that is what we will do, Ryan said. He pulled her close, kissing her temple. I am proud of you. You know that, right? What you have built, how you have handled every obstacle. I am so incredibly proud. She burrowed into him. I could not have done it without you. You absolutely could have. It might have taken longer and the path might have been different, but you would have found a way. That is who you are. Going public with their relationship was both easier and harder than expected. Some people in the industry did whisper, but most were supportive or simply indifferent. Ryan's partners were already aware, and while David remained skeptical, he could not argue with Green Wrap's growth trajectory. Rebecca's team was happy for her, especially Maria, who had apparently started a betting pool about when they would finally admit they were together. A year after the initial investment, Green Wrap had tripled its revenue and was in talks with 2 major national chains. They had expanded to 40 employees and were scouting locations for a second production facility. Rebecca was featured in a business magazine article about women entrepreneurs in the sustainability space, and she used the interview to talk transparently about the challenges of mixing business with personal relationships. Does it complicate things? Absolutely, she said in the article. But I have learned that the best parts of life are complicated. What matters is having clear communication, strong boundaries, and mutual respect. Ryan respects me as a founder and as a partner, and I respect him the same way. We challenge each other to be better in both roles. Ryan read the article 3 times, marveling at how she managed to articulate things he could barely put into words. 2 years after their first meeting, Ryan took Rebecca back to the restaurant where they had their first date. She assumed it was just a nice dinner out, a chance to celebrate Green Wrap's latest contract. But when dessert came, there was a ring on the plate. Rebecca stared at it, then at Ryan, who had moved to kneel beside the table. You talked once about dying on a hill for what you believe in, Ryan said. I want to spend my life standing on that hill with you. You make me better, Rebecca. You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. I love your passion and your determination and the way you refuse to compromise on things that matter. I love how you paint terrible pictures and cry at cooking shows and know everyone's coffee order. I love you completely, and I want to marry you. Will you? She was crying, nodding before she could get words out. Yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him up, kissing him in front of the entire restaurant. People applauded, and Ryan realized he had never felt this happy, this certain about anything. They planned a wedding for the following fall. Something small and intimate, just family and close friends. Jake was best man after beating out Ryan's childhood friend in a fake rock, paper, scissors tournament. Maria was Rebecca's maid of honor, and she gave a speech about watching Rebecca build both a company and a life worth living. The ceremony was outdoors at a venue overlooking the ocean, because of course it was. Rebecca wore a simple dress that made her look like some kind of sea goddess, and when Ryan saw her walking down the aisle, he had to blink back tears. They wrote their own vows, and Rebecca's included a promise to always tell him when she was stressed before the stress turned into a 3 in the morning panic call. Ryan promised to remember that sometimes she needed him to just listen, not solve. "I promise to love you in board meetings and on lazy Sundays," Rebecca said. "I promise to challenge you and support you and never let you settle for less than you are capable of. I promise to share my life and my heart and occasionally my takeout, even though you always steal the best parts. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word," Ryan said. "To celebrate your victories and weather your storms. To remember that we are a team in business and in life. To never stop being amazed by you, and to always order extra spring rolls so you cannot complain when I steal them." They were pronounced husband and wife, and the kiss was long enough that Jake shouted, "Save it for the honeymoon." The reception was full of laughter and dancing and speeches that ranged from touching to embarrassing. Ryan's mother told stories about how he used to be terrible at talking to girls, and Rebecca's brother shared photos from her awkward teenage phase. But mostly, it was a celebration of two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way and built something real. They honeymooned in New Zealand, 2 weeks of complete disconnection from work. They hiked and explored and spent long days doing nothing but being together. Rebecca did not check her email once, which Ryan considered a miracle. On their last night, they sat on a beach watching the sunset, and Rebecca leaned against him. "You ever think about how differently things could have gone?" she asked. "Like, what if you had not been late to that presentation? What if I had pitched to a different firm?" "I try not to," Ryan admitted, "because thinking about a world where I did not meet you is depressing." "I almost canceled that pitch," Rebecca said quietly. "The night before, I was so scared. I almost convinced myself that you would just reject me anyway, so why bother? But then I thought about my dad, about that promise, and I made myself go." Ryan tightened his arm around her. "I am really glad you did. Me too." 5 years after the initial investment, Castellan Capital helped facilitate Green Wrap's acquisition by a major international corporation for $200 million. Rebecca stayed on as CEO, with complete autonomy and a significant ownership stake. The deal made her wealthy beyond her wildest dreams, but more than that, it gave her the resources to expand her impact globally. Ryan watched her sign the papers, and he felt a complex mix of pride and something like grief. He had been there from the beginning, watched her build this company from desperate startup to industry leader. This sale was the right move, gave her the stability and reach to really change things, but it also marked the end of an era. Afterward, they went back to the house they had bought together, a place with big windows and enough space for Rebecca's studio and Ryan's home gym. She kicked off her heels and collapsed on the couch. "I just sold my company," she said, staring at the ceiling. "You just secured Green Wrap's future," Ryan corrected, sitting next to her. "There is a difference. I know it is the right thing, but it is weird. That company was my whole identity for so long." "So now you get to figure out what comes next," Ryan said. "You are 32 years old and financially secure. You can do anything you want." She turned to look at him. "I want to start a foundation. Focus on ocean conservation, partner with other sustainable companies, maybe offer grants to young entrepreneurs trying to make a difference. I want to take everything I learned building Green Wrap and help other people do the same thing." Ryan smiled. "That is perfect, and you know I will help however I can." "I know." She sat up, taking his hands. "There is something else I want too." "What?" "A baby, maybe more than one. I want us to have a family." Ryan's heart did something complicated in his chest. They had talked about kids abstractly in a someday kind of way, but this was concrete, real. "I want that too," he said. "I really want that." Rebecca got pregnant 4 months later, and Ryan discovered that watching his wife carry their child was the most terrifying and amazing experience of his life. He went to every appointment, read every book, drove her crazy with his overprotectiveness. When she was 7 months along and still trying to finalize foundation logistics, he physically removed her laptop. "You are supposed to be resting," he said. "I am sitting down. That is resting, Rebecca," she sighed. "Fine, but you are rubbing my feet later, deal." Their daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday in April, 8 pounds and with her mother's green eyes. They named her Caroline, after Rebecca's father, whose middle name had been Carl. Ryan held her for the first time and understood what people meant about your heart existing outside your body. Watching Rebecca with their daughter was somehow even more overwhelming. She was patient and loving and occasionally completely frazzled, especially at 3 in the morning when Caroline would not sleep. But she was also determined to figure it out, approaching motherhood with the same fierce commitment she brought to everything else. Ryan's parents were obsessed grandparents, driving up every weekend to help. Rebecca's mother flew in from Oregon and stayed for a month, and the two women grew close in a way they had not been since Rebecca's father died. Jake visited and looked comically terrified holding his tiny niece. The foundation launched when Caroline was 6 months old, and Rebecca ran it the same way she had run Green Wrap, with passion and precision. She funded 12 startups in the first year, all focused on environmental solutions. She partnered with universities to offer scholarships for students pursuing sustainability degrees. She created a mentorship program connecting experienced entrepreneurs with newcomers. Ryan watched her juggle motherhood and the foundation and still make time for the two of them, and he fell in love with her all over again. When Caroline was 2, Rebecca got pregnant again, this time with a boy they named James. Their family grew, and their house got louder and messier and more full of love than Ryan had ever imagined possible. He cut back his hours at Castellan Capital, bringing in a new partner to handle day-to-day operations. He wanted to be present, to not miss the moments that mattered. On their 10th anniversary, they went back to that first restaurant, leaving the kids with Ryan's parents. They sat at the same corner table, and Rebecca looked at the ring on her finger, now accompanied by a wedding band. "You remember what you said that first night?" she asked. "About how weird it was." "Good weird," Ryan said. "Definitely good weird. It is still weird sometimes, but it is also the best thing that ever happened to me." She reached across the table and he took her hand automatically. "I love the life we built, Ryan. I love our kids and our work and the fact that we still make time for dates even when we are exhausted. I love that you still look at me like you did in that conference room." "I will always look at you like that," Ryan said. "You are the most remarkable person I have ever met. You walked into my office and turned my entire world upside down, and I would not change a single thing." They kissed across the table, and it was sweet and familiar and still made his heart race. Years continued to pass, marked by milestones both professional and personal. The foundation grew, funding over 100 companies. Green Wrap's products became industry standard, available in stores worldwide. Caroline grew into a determined little girl who wanted to save every animal she saw. James developed his father's analytical mind and his mother's stubborn streak. Ryan built a life he had never known he wanted. Yes, he still ran Castellan Capital, still made investments and closed deals. But his true wealth was measured in Sunday mornings with his family. in watching Rebecca speak passionately about conservation at conferences, in tiny hands grabbing his and pulling him to look at something important. When Caroline was 10 and James was 8, they all took a trip to Oregon to visit Rebecca's mother. They spent a day on the beach, and Rebecca showed the kids the tide pools her father had shown her as a child. She talked about him with easy fondness now, the grief softened by time and a life well lived. Ryan watched his children hunt for sea creatures, their laughter carried on the ocean wind. He watched his wife crouch beside them, pointing out small crabs and explaining about ecosystems. And he thought about that conference room 12 years ago, about a woman with ink-stained thumbs and fire in her eyes. He thought about how he could not stop staring, and how that staring had turned into something more real than anything else in his life. Rebecca caught his eye and smiled, and in that smile was everything: their history, their present, their future. Years of challenges and victories, of late-night conversations and early-morning kisses, of building a family and a life that mattered. "What are you thinking about?" she called to him. Ryan walked over, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they watched their children play. "Just that I am the luckiest man alive." "Sappy," she teased, but leaned back against him. True, though, and it was, every single word. They stayed on that beach until sunset, and as the sky turned orange and pink, Rebecca took Ryan's hand. Their children ran ahead, chasing the waves, and they followed at a slower pace. Together, the way they had been since the moment she walked into his conference room and changed everything. The way they would be for the rest of their lives.